We'll see what else is going on here.
Well, yeah, we will, because it's 10 o'clock, and that means it's Lancaster Woodturners Weekly Coffee Hour. This is May 26th and coffee hour number 104. I only have one announcement, and that is that the Lancaster Club June meeting will be June 7th. It'll be a hybrid meeting in New Holland and on Zoom. And I believe the speaker is our club vice president, Ben Kaufman, who's dug up. We don't know our own history, but Ben's been figuring it out. And I think he's been interviewing Ray, who was the club founder, and I think he's found some documents. And so we're going to talk about that. It's going to be that kind of a talking meeting in New Holland. And then the July meeting is the picnic, which will be at Mannheim Town Park off of Valley Road. And I believe the challenge for July is make a wooden frisbee and let's throw them around the field at the picnic grounds. So those are the announcements that I have. Anybody else got any announcements? Don't see any hands raised. It's a show and tell morning. We usually use raise hand to form a queue. I do have some pictures that people have sent me, but Barry got in touch with me and said he'd finally or actually made the lathe tailstock swing away he's been promising for a while and would like to show that. And so I think that would be a good start for this morning. So let's see, Barry, where are you?
Okay, I'll share. Okay, you got the image of the stock photo of a jet lathe with a swing away tailstock there?
Yeah.
Okay, this was kind of my inspiration, if you will. I was actually on the cusp of buying one, and they're about $370. And in just looking at it, I didn't really see where, since it was not my plan to ever use it as like a bed extension of 5 inches or anything, but simply for a place to park the tailstock, get it out of the way, and then readily bring it back up without having to make any adjustments or anything. And so, like I said, that's my starting point. And Powermatic,
I'm on the
they
phone.
work with Jet. So Powermatics is essentially the same, but it's a different bolt pattern that it attaches to. And this is just another stock image of when the pin is released and it's folded down at about 90 degrees. It gets it out of your way, down below the working level. And I guess this is more important for me than a lot of turners, just because I'm left-handed. And I really have a hard time adapting to right-handed turning. And so I slide my headstock down close to the tailstock end and work standing at the right end of the lathe pretty much. So I don't like having to constantly take off and put the tailstock somewhere. So here's a first still photo. The wood is 5/4 white oak. It's been machined down to just over 1 inch thick. And it's attached to, there's a 4-bolt pattern at the end of the stock that is meant for either a swing away attachment or a bed extension. And so it bolts on with 3 of those bolts, and then the knobby looking thing you see down there, that's a combination of like registration, alignment, and tightening. It goes in the 4th hole of the mounting system. The platens that you see on top are corian that I scrounged from Kaufman's trash can up at the meeting place, and it's been bonded on to the wood with JB Wells cement. And they line up in both axes on the bed, so it accepts the tailstock readily. And then you see an end view looking toward the headstock. And you can kind of see sticking out on the right-hand side there, the hinge. And finally, here it is opened up. And you can see one thing you can see is I misdrilled a few holes and I had to plug the holes. I don't know. In one case, I misdrilled it twice. And just a shortcoming on my part with ruler on the 1 inch mark instead of the end point for a more accurate ruling, and then forgetting to subtract or add the inch. The hinge is critical. I made an earlier one where I used a heavy duty hinge that did not have bearings in it, and the metal involved in the hinge itself was like 3/32, and it had enough flex that it was very unstable. And so I redid it with this was you can buy them separately, one hinge at a time for $8 at Home Depot, and it's not a removable pin, which I wish it was, but it's not a removable pin, and it has bearings between the leaves that make it very smooth and no up and down play in it.
Did you experiment with the angle of the swing away, or did you just take the whatever that is, 45, and go with it?
Now, if you can calculate the steepest angle you can use by measuring the angle between the top of your bed, and in this case, it's like a curve with the legs curving down there. And if I just looked at that, I had like, it was around 75 degrees, like from horizontal sweeping down to where you contact the legs. And so if you split that in half, you wind up with like 35 degrees. But at the risk of getting it down, possibly miscalculating and having it rub, I just went ahead and did it at 30 degrees. And I think the best I can measure, the ones that Jet and Powermatic sell, are right about 35 degrees on the angle. Anything would work. 10 degrees would work.
But it seems
as
like
long as when it's hanging down, your hand wheel or anything aren't sticking up above the plane of work, up higher than the bed.
But the lower it hangs down, the more lifting you have to do to get it back up. Whereas if it were a steeper angle and less drop down, it might be easier to lift up. I don't know.
Yeah, in fact, I made one where I used no hinge at all. It was, well, I mean, I bandsawed the oak, so it was like a drilled and aligned, built into the oak, a hinge, and no angle, just because of how the leaves had to interlay. And it was fine, but the tailstock was still sitting up there. Admittedly, I'm not going to turn something 40 inches in diameter, but it was bothersome to have the hand wheel up that high. So I wanted to get it down below it, looked at what the commercial solution was. And finally, we have a video here, a little 1-minute video. There's your alignment pin registration. And also that small lip that you see on the bottom is like an absolute, so it won't sag down below that. It aids in the support.
Barry, you need a quick release for that screw string thing, some kind of quick release.
Yeah, I couldn't think of how to, I did try fewer thread turns, but I was afraid I wasn't engaging the threads in the cast iron good enough. So it does have about nearly a 1/2 inch of engagement. It could be cut down a little bit, but I couldn't think of a quick release on it.
Put a pin in and use one of those snap clip things that, like toolboxes or whatever, pull it tight.
Yeah, Rockler sells a unit that I don't care for it at all, but it doesn't have any angle. It simply swings it in the same plane, and when you close it, it has like a spring-loaded latch. That when you close the latch, you pull, I guess, an alignment pin in tight. I had considered one of these, mag switch or whatever you call them. They're available up to like a 150-pound magnet, whatever, and you can turn it on or off and have it engage a metal boss. Since I don't use it for load bearing at all, the magnet would work. And I'm expecting to make one of these for the Powermatic up at our shop, up at our clubhouse. Excuse me. And if I do, I might try the magnet approach for a quick release.
Hey, Barry, that's really clever. I have the Powermatic commercial product. And what's interesting about it is it's amazing how often that extra 5 inches does prevent me from actually needing to swing it away, probably except when I'm hollowing. And although I'm left-handed too, I tend to use the lathe, I guess, right-handed. John had that question regarding the difficulty in swinging it up or not. In the Powermatic, of course, the tailstock is probably 50 pounds or so, and I don't find any of that a problem. The only find that's difficult is holding it there while you get the screw started or aligned properly seems to be the most difficult thing on the commercial piece.
Yeah, that's why I added that little tab that you see at the bottom in the picture there. So when it is closed, even without the bolt in place, now it will want to swing itself open, so you have to hold it in with gentle pressure. But that ledge on the bottom makes sure it lines up well and takes the load off so you're not running your threads in with the load on the one side of the threads. And also you have to, if anybody should try to make one of these, notice on top, it is not level, it's cut at an angle except for the final like 1/4 inch. If you see right where it butts up against the lathe up on top, because it starts swinging away on a downward angle. And I first made it square without considering that, and it wouldn't open up because the Corian platens were frictioning on the wood and wouldn't come off it. And so everything has to be on that, a slight takeaway angle so it can accommodate the downswing. But I'm happy with how it worked out, and it is very convenient.
I'd be worried about the Corian being bonded, only bonded to the wood. I didn't even know JB Weld would bond Corian to wood, but wouldn't it be better if you had some screws set in there or something? That would worry me.
Yeah, it's not ideal, and I have since I took these pictures. I drilled down through the Corian, and there's one screw in each, just so that a sudden blow, it might fracture the bond, but it won't display, it won't move it away, and I can re-adhere it readily. But yeah, the Corian does not, I thought JB Weld would bond better to Corian. It does a sharp smack when it will come off. So a redesign would have a better foot under the Corian for more bonding area. There only is about 1.5 inch square bonding area under each platen.
You could countersink screws in there pretty easily, couldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, but just the way I made it, the wood wasn't thick enough there to get a pair of screws in.
Yeah.
I could come back and add some more wood filler. I mean, fill in wood, so I could tap into it. And, I probably will do that. But like I say, I don't use it for load bearing at all, just for swinging away. But I think if I were to have it hit something on the way down, one of those platens could come off. But as it is, it lines up well enough that you could do spindle turning on it. It lines up pretty much dead on, but I wouldn't trust anything bigger than a slender spindle running at high speed on it. But that's it.
Okay, let's add your share. Okay. Anybody else in the room want? We have a couple other people I know who have some of these tailstock things, but I want to know who else has got tailstock stuff that they want to show. Tailstock to go along with Barry. I know that Duxbury has, and I have.
I've got my tailstock I can show here, but I wanted to show the hollowing with the camera.
Okay, let's come back to you and show that after.
All right.
We'll finish with this topic for a bit. Duxbury, let's go to you next.
Okay. Let me do a screen share here. This is a Powermatic 3520A. And first off, I bear no liability for this. I mean, this is made for me. I use my lathe, and you can tell this lathe is customized. I mean, that fits like an old leather coat. Everything on here works for me. It's totally unsafe, but my wife wanted to use this too. That tailstock weighs 85 pounds. And to lift that on and off, like I say, I use this all day. And to lift that on and off 50, 60 times is just out of the question. Also, I can't justify paying $300 for a $60 hinge that's painted yellow. It just plain rubs me the wrong way. I wanted this totally out of the way too. So this is my solution. Underneath the tailstock is a round washer, 3 inches in diameter, probably a ½ inch thick. I can show pictures of that later, but I cut the sides off it. So it's rectangular. There's a small lever right here. And what happens is I release the tailstock pressure, pull this lever out. When you pull this lever out, that indexes that washer 90 degrees. So it fits up between the ways. So you pull this lever out and then relock it. Then on the top, here's an eye bolt that's been put in. Over here is a hook to a winch on the ceiling. And there's a push button right there that lifts the thing up. You'll see it in action, I hope. But anyway, I'm going to release the pressure on the tailstock, the lock, pull that lever and relock it. Then hook the hook to the top, push the button, and it'll go up. Now, I unlock it, pull the handle, lock it, get the hook, put the hook in the eye, push the button, it goes up. Now that could also drift over and set on the floor or on a table or anywhere else you want to put it.
Or whack you on the head on the way up.
No, you put it, you learn that quick. Anyway, let me put the next one. Where'd it go? Here we go. Now push the button. Go down. Lift it up to the side so it doesn't hit too hard. Take the hook out. Hang it on the wall, unloosen it, push the knob in and tighten it, and away you go. You okay?
I'm amazed.
I do this 100 times a day sometimes, okay? It just goes so fast. Making a video makes it look awkward, but it just goes up and down, unbelievable.
Are you going to show more pictures? Shall I end your share?
End the share, or unless you want to see pictures of underneath, but
I think I want to get it back to a gallery view and see who wants to talk here.
okay.
Questions for Jim? Questions for Brian?
Hey, Jim, you ought to name that thing the tailstock of Damocles.
Did you ever put it down on your finger?
Never. No, it works like a charm. I tell you, it just, other than you couldn't use it at the club because if you don't know what you're doing, it'll lift the lathe off the floor. Okay. It's not messing around, but it works fabulous. I use it every day. That Powermatic is so, my wife calls it cannibalized. It is so customized to me. Most people couldn't use that lathe at all. It just works. I love it.
Jim, in a former life, did you put engines in at the GM factory or something? I mean, that's exactly swing it over, drop it in.
No, I just wanted it totally out of the way. I didn't want to lift 10 pounds. I didn't want to swing it out. Also, that thing, the total amount of money spent was probably about $110, okay? The lift is from Harbor Freight. The eye bolt and a couple other things are, I think it was about $110.
I couldn't turn under that. if Harbor Freight made the winch, I'd be afraid of dropping my head. So
No,
just
Put it,
kidding.
put it down on the floor and then pick it up again.
yeah, you could put it anywhere you want. You could swing it over to the wall and set it on a shelf if you wanted, but it's just as easy. I do this a lot, and I don't have time to mess around with it.
Any more table or tailstock solutions from the room before I go to one last one?
I have one general question. Why not just put an extension bed sticking out and forget all this mechanical stuff? That's the way I do it. Just slide it all the way down.
Still
You
in
don't
your
even
way.
need to put a leg on it. You just
Still in your-
slide it off.
Still in your way.
Not in mine.
When you get in there with a hollowing rig, and it will be.
Nope. I hollow a lot. Mine's long. My DVR. I don't know. It seems like a lot of mechanical thing, lifting and tilting and bending and folding. Just
Well, I'm going to show you one more quickie, and then I'm going to go to some slides that that other people have sent me. Why does it say stop share? The photo I'm trying to show you is of my robust Scout with the tailstock in position, and then down here you see a bracket that is screwed on underneath the wooden support system that I have for my lathe. These blocks up here hold the support tailstock for long spindles. Can you see that picture?
yep.
Anybody else see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, we're good.
Can you see this one? Okay. Now you can see it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the tailstock lifted off, slid off the end and dropped down onto the little wooden bracket that it sits on. And then that's it from another view. It's totally out of the way. But that's because that tailstock only weighs about 15 or 20 pounds. It's not like one of these 80-pound behemoths. But if I were to be working with an 80-pound behemoth, I think I would figure out a way with a pneumatic cylinder to just slide it and lift it, lower it down and raise it up again with Corian ways like Barry had, or some gizmo like that. I don't know.
So what's the wood for bolted onto your tailstock?
That's to hold a 5/8 inch rod that becomes a tool rest when I'm doing a long spindle.
Mm.
That goes to another similar poppet to this that is mounted in the tool rest, a banjo that's up by the headstock. So now I can have a 3-foot round tool rest on running all along the latheways. It does need a prop under the middle, but I just use a block of wood under the middle. And that lets me not have to fiddle with tool rest when I'm doing a batch of spindles.
I use the end of my lathe. I walk around it. I don't, doesn't that thing get in the way?
I don't walk around my lathe like that
Oh,
because it's a Scout. The headstock doesn't pivot. It has a faceplate on the outboard side, and I have another piece of ways on the outboard side of the headstock, so I can turn outboard without having to move the headstock.
oh, I see. No, I actually pull the headstock right down to the end sometimes and use the end. And
Yeah, that's not available on this lathe, but mine's a standard size lathe. It's a 1442. I've always found I used to have a much bigger lathe, and not for me anymore. Okay, and while I've got a share going here, I'm going to go to, unless there's any other comments on this, I'm going to go to some other stuff that people have sent me. Okay. Dave Delo, what are you showing us here? Where's Dave Delo? I know he's here. I saw him.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah, there he is.
Hey, this is my my new baby that should be put on the truck here this morning. So I was in the market to get a different lathe that would be more ergonomical to all the screws that I have in my head and back, or my neck and my back. So to make it a little bit easier. So I wanted a rotating headstock lathe. And so this is a picture of the new baby that'll be arriving here shortly. And this is the Vicmark VL240. The headstock is pointed out towards us right now for shipping, and then it'll rotate when I get it. But the whole purpose of this is to be able to rotate that headstock like 30 degrees to make it a little bit easier for me, so I'm not bending over so much. So this is, like I say, the new baby, and I'll be excited to bring her home here in about a week.
Is that red bar a kill switch or something?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Huh.
And what's the size of that lathe? What's the swing and what's the bed length? And are you going to add a bed extension?
Yes, I did add a bed extension with a swing away. But for the most part, I think I'll just configure it just as you see it right now. I'm primarily getting this for bowls. And so it'll be real easy access all the way around. This is only, it's got a little over 19-inch swing to it. And this is about 20 inches in length. Okay, center to center. So nice, short, compact thing. Be able to swing this headstock out and have excellent access to everything. The lathe weighs about 650 pounds. So it's has adjustable legs on it. So this will be a nice, heavy, reliable platform to turn on.
Does the headstock move? Does it slide on the bed?
No, it only rotates. You can rotate it another 90 degrees and get a outrigger contraption and turn. So you could turn something, until the floor, 50 inches or something like that. But that's of no interest to me. I just want to be able to turn that headstock just a shade, so I'm not bending over. And I have a stool, and it's not so much for, like a twice turn bolt, hogging out for the first turn. That doesn't bother me so much, but it's the finish turning and the sanding where you're bent over and you're looking at making sure you got all the tool marks out or all the sanding marks out from a previous grit. And, so you're bent over quite a bit. And that bothers me. So this is going to be hopefully a solution to that.
Is that a magnetic power switch?
Yes, it is.
Any other questions?
Dave, is there a bolt pattern at the left end that so you could mount a support system for outrigger?
Yes, there is. Yes, sir. On the left-hand side, on the headstock side, is you would rotate that headstock clockwise another 90 degrees,
Right.
And that would give you your outrigger support there. And the holes are on the backside here.
So is the motor contained inside the cast iron housing up there?
No,
right
the
behind
motor, you can't see the motor right now. It's sticking out the backside from the faceplate there. You just can't see it. So what?
There is no belt involved.
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Yes, there is. Yes, the motor sticks out the backside, like just you can't see it because the banjo is in the way. Okay,
Yeah.
and if you this is the way it gets shipped to you, so that the packaging can be more compact. But when you rotate that headstock, that faceplate around 90 degrees, that motor will be sticking out this way.
Any other comments or questions for Dave?
Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to keep the share because I have couple other slides from somebody else. Don Smith, if I can get the share to work. Yes. Okay, this is here. Don, what are these?
Right. A few weeks ago, I was asked if I would make some faces for some cannonballs. And the one in the middle is a 20-pounder.
Where did these come from, Don?
These have come from, they're either off the HMS Victory or the Mary Rose from the Portsmouth Dockyard. And they wanted stands so that they could put them on display so that people could see them and not have them rolling around. So I said, yes, I'd do it. So I took all the diameters of all the balls, and there is one, this one here is the heaviest. And then these three at the back were about 15 pounders. And then you had two more at about 10, and the bottom three were between 5 and 8 pound cannonballs. So I took the diameter of all of them, drew them all up with on paper with the circle, and then just took a inch cut across it. And if we go to the second slide, John.
That's the third slide. I'll go back. There you are.
There we are. That's each of those has a different diameter dish in it to take the different cannonballs. And they went down very well. They're all in sapele, and they're all in one piece. So when we come to the third one, there they are all set up. There's the big one, and then as they come down to the three small ones.
Huh. So the trick was tailoring the cavity to each ball so they would sit and not rattle around and sit snug.
Right.
When you were up there.
Now, there should have been 12 of them. But when I opened the box of the last three, it was amazing how these cannonballs are actually made, because the outer casing seems to be very smooth on some of them. And these, of course, are where they probably come out of the sea or wherever, but they're very smooth. But the ones that came in, they were broken. It looked as if there was an outer layer around a ball. So the ball was smooth, but inside it was just like wrought iron. And water got in and just blown them open. It was really amazing to think how they must have made them back in what, 1600s?
Wow.
But it was absolutely amazing. So it was a project that I thoroughly enjoyed doing.
Questions for Don?
And if I could, John, I've got two other little projects I just wanted to show you before we go off on the camera.
Well, I have to stop the share, which I'll do. And
Right.
I think we're back to spotlighting on you. What do you want to do?
Right. Last week, we had a chap on who was doing a lot of production turning. In the last week, I had an order for 60 of these little bud vase. And they're going to be presented. They've gone to somebody now who makes up little silk bouquets, posies to go in, and therefore, like the Lions Club dinner, ladies' night.
Hold it up. We can't quite see it. There you go.
And each one of those is going to be put in front of a lady for their ladies' night dinner. The other one, has anybody ever made one of these before?
And that's an hourglass in there? An egg timer?
4-minute egg timer.
So how does it work? And how'd you get it in there?
Ah, that's the secret. You actually turn it round and then you turn it off center after you made a hole for it. And of course, the lid's stuck on now, but the lid does come off. If you're interested, I could
lift it up higher so we can see.
I could photograph how I make them.
Yeah, we'd like that.
If you'd like me to.
I would like that, sure. It's a good little project. So the opening in there is made by off-center turning, and then the burn line hides where the lid is glued on. Is that what we're seeing?
That's correct.
All
First of all, you start off with a piece of wood, you turn it round, you part off a piece for the cap, you drill the hole inside.
Lift it up, yep.
Drill the hole inside. You then move your center points. You have to, of course, put a pencil line on to make certain that your two off-center points are identical. And then that turns round. You turn the center out, then put your glass tube in and fix the top on. Or rather, before you put the glass tube in, put the lid on, hold it tight, burn the lines in, And then I have 2 jigs, one for facing off that end, and then another one for facing off the lid.
Very
And then
nice.
you just put it in and glue the lid on.
Where did you get the egg timer from?
Well, we used to have craft supplies over here in England, but they've burnt out, they've gone.
You'll find them on Amazon, I'm sure.
Sure, you can still find them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can do that, and I'll do it for a couple of weeks' time.
Cool. Okay.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I hope that just shows you what can be done. I mean, at the moment on my table, I've got 2 trophies I've just made. They're being collected tomorrow for the Rugby League World Cup, RAF Rugby League World Cup. And I've got 2 bases I've just finished, and they're sitting on my table at the moment, ready for collection.
Nice
So
to see.
I'm quite busy at the moment.
Nice to hear from you this morning, Don.
Yeah, and thank you very much for.
Neat idea on the egg timer, Don.
Pardon?
I say a neat idea on the egg timer. I like that.
Yeah, I've made loads of those over the years. It's amazing what they do. It's only a 4-minute egg timer, but you don't use them these days, but it's still a little novelty.
I'm going to go to Rich Colvin. What do you got, Rich?
Hey, so I was asked about the idea of using a camera for hollowing, and this is showing, you know, the cutter here. So what I have is a camera, you can see there, that's just mounted on the rod, and that rod was the one that initially had the laser on it. So I just took the laser off with the camera on, and that's hooked up to just this TV. I mean, it's actually a computer monitor here. So you can see there exactly where the cutter is. And, you know, you can see it's right here. What I do is overlay a sheet of plastic on there with where the cutter is. And then as I move the cutter, I can see it inside the wood. So that's how you use these camera systems. And it's really nice. The red line is a 1/2 inch diameter around that. And then the blue line is 3/4. So I use that to say, you know, when I've gotten to over here to the red line, I want to stop with this cutter, and then I'll switch to, you know, the teardrop scraping cutter here instead. So, but that way I can get around to the ends of the curves and not have to worry about it. And with the laser, you have to continuously readjust it. With this camera system, with those curves, you don't have to readjust as you go around the curves inside the object.
And can you back out a bit so we can see the whole amount of apparatus you've got attached to that lathe?
Sure.
Okay, so whose hollowing system is that, and whose steady rest and all of that stuff?
So it's the Carter Steady Rest, and then this is the old Carter XL hollower. I don't know that they make these anymore. They had bought it from somebody else, and I think somebody else, but it's a Capture D system, and it's really heavy, but it allows me to go, as you can see, very, very deep, because that's a 3520 lathe, and I can go, you know, almost the whole length. I think I can go 18 inches deep on this hollowing.
So do you ever get any stresses from catching at the workpiece end that tends to lift this roller business over here at the right up off the ground, or knock it off, or anything like that?
No, I've never gotten that. That arm is, I think, 80 pounds. It's pretty heavy because the round part here that you can see, that's solid steel.
And whose hollowing system is that again?
It was from Carter. They called it the Hollow Roller XL.
Okay.
I don't know that they sell them anymore. I think they stopped because I don't know that they were selling many.
But isn't this a lot like the Jameson system? It's basically a gate, isn't it?
Yeah, I didn't lower the top bar here. I didn't lower this down. Normally you would to capture fairly well. And I would use wax to on the bottom side here, but this rolls as you move in and out.
He has a swing away tailstock.
I saw that.
Yeah, I do.
Hey, I have a question. The bar that holds the camera, what kind of mount are they using? Because that's the big issue in these build ones, is to make them solid enough. What is that, a solid lockum?
This is actually steel. So
Okay.
they drilled, you know, what, a 1.5 inch hole here, and then they drilled, I guess, maybe that's a 2-inch hole, but this is a single piece of steel. And then there's a nut here. I mean, a screw, set screw. And then there's one over down here for the other side. But it locks it in place.
And the bar is solid steel also?
No, it's tubular steel, because you can see this is where the battery went for the old laser system. And then the wires would go up it. But I don't use that. I just use, I've never had the need for that.
So where's the point to the overhead camera that makes that image on the screen, please? Okay, so it's right up there, and it's attached to the hollowing rig in effect, isn't it?
Yep.
So vibration's not an issue. In other words, it doesn't shake and all that stuff.
Well, I mean, if you get some rough cuts, or you get too aggressive in your cuts, it's going to get a little shaky on the camera, but it gets out really fast. And then the only other piece, this camera has this connector here. You can see it's called a BNC connector. So that doesn't plug into the computer screen. So you have to have this little box here. It's a converter that converts that BNC into a VGA. And the link I sent out 2 weeks ago, and I can send it again, shows you where to get all these parts. You can get it from Amazon. I think the total spend here was about $100.
Send that again, because I missed it the other week.
Sure.
I suspect John has it on his feed, but
dump it in the chat.
I want to build one.
Yeah. I'm
telling you, it's beautiful to use, because you don't have to readjust like the laser. On the laser, as you would go around this curve here, you'd have to have a different setting on this flat area than you would as you're coming out here, and then different over here as you're coming in. With this, you just have you use it to where that curve matches where the edge is, and you're good to go.
Robert Hodge, what's your comment down there? If you go to a TV screen, connect to the video of RCA cable.
Yeah, I've got the same setup with going to a TV monitor, and it can just connect to the video rather than having that little converter box.
Yeah, I think I've never had a spare TV around that worked, so I didn't try that. But this works fine with the VGA input. So,
well, we have you here. Let's look at the steady rest that you're using there too.
Sure.
Back out a little bit so we can see the whole thing, please. Great, good. That's
this is helpful. The smaller. They have an XL. This is the regular size one. It's called a multi-rest from Carter. They make really good stuff, because Carter Tools, they've actually make parts for aircraft industry. So they make really good quality aluminum pieces, and then everything blue is aluminum. The silver parts are aluminum, and then it uses standard bearing wheels. And it's nice too that you can unscrew this screw and then this one down here, and then the whole thing will swing out. So you can actually have something, fully mounted there and have that swung out. Let me go ahead and do it for you.
Well, you got to hold the camera a little stiller. We're going to get seasick with all this waving around.
Okay. So now.
You got to back out too. We can't really see what you're doing.
Okay. Well, it's not happening.
But yeah.
So that.
There you go.
That. You can loosen those two screws, and the top piece will swing out so that you can get access to the object that you're working on and put it in place.
Are those wheels hard or soft or in between?
I would say they're in between. They're not really hard.
And are they each independently adjustable, or is there something connecting them?
They're independently adjusting.
So you can see you could be way off center with them.
Yeah, you could. Well, if you were way off center, I don't know that they would really work, because you have to have all three of them engaged to really hold the piece, right?
So how do you get them really truly centered with a piece like that? Do you use a cone in the tailstock to center the workpiece in the first place, or what do you do?
So when it's, once you've turned the outside and it's still in the headstock and the tailstock, then I'll put this on and center it there, and then it stays where it needs to be.
Okay. Any more questions for Rich?
Yeah, Rich, are you using any of the hunter tools, or are you using the flat scrapers?
So this actually is a hunter tool.
Nice. Yeah.
It works very well for getting it really roughed out, but you can see it leaves kind of a rougher finish on the inside there.
Yeah.
And that's where you'll use the scraper to finish up.
I have the little brother to that. That's the way I do it.
Yeah.
Hug out with the hunter, and then I come in with the teardrops and get a nice smooth finish.
Exactly. That's exactly
very nice. Very nice.
Very nice setup. Any more questions for Rich? Okay, I think I want to take the spotlight off you, and I think we're going to go to Bruce. Bruce, you're up next.
I wanted to go back to Barry's last discussion regarding, see, I have a note from you, okay. Vacuum chucks, which I fought the desire to do for years and finally went down the path. And I think, Barry, your system, the way you actually get the vacuum into the lathe with simply two sleeves of plastic rotating over each other. Is that right?
He may have moved.
Excuse me. Yeah, there is no bearing involved. You put the 1/4-inch OD tubing, glue it into the to the stem that's coming down from the vacuum chuck. So it's rotating with the chuck, and then that polyethylene tubing. And I just to stress, it has to be polyethylene and not vinyl tubing. But polyethylene 3/8 OD tubing is a naturally undersized 1/4-inch ID, and it slides on quite easily, and the lack of friction is aided by, I guess you could use an oil, but I'd worry about the plastic wearing on that. So I just use spray-on Teflon.
But then you're going to suck whatever you do into the pump as well, right? So anyway, I explored from there, and so I wanted to know what else I could do. So I looked at a few things, and there's a whole bunch of commercial products out there.
Are you going to share screen there?
I am sharing my screen, yes.
I'm going to leave Barry up as well because he may have some comments here.
Okay, but you have that picture of the one-way product?
Yeah.
So this is, I always liked one-way because they make everything big and strong. Maybe over-engineer, I don't know. But this is one commercial option that's out there, and it's made to fit a whole bunch of different lathes. To give you an idea of the size of it, this is a one-way live center that most people have. This is a big hunk of metal where the bearing is this piece right here in the bottom, and you just slide this onto the outboard portion of your lathe, and then you don't need to run a tube through the lathe is the whole idea. You get a seal that's up here. And the way they make this for different lathes is just the way they make chucks, is that you have an adapter that slides in and anchors to the back of this thing. And mine, for my particular Powermatic, there are gaskets about halfway down here. You slide this in until the gasket actually encounters your headstock, and you just screw it down on the edge. So this is one way. And
what that thing cost? What did that thing cost?
It's about $130.
Okay.
It is definitely the high-end dollar way to do this. I'll show you another way too. But my lathe has this nice wheel to turn the headstock that I like a lot. And unfortunately, to use this, you have to pull that off, which I didn't like. And I asked Mike Peace about that last time. He must have one that goes on the inside of this. That's the only way I know you could otherwise do that. But the way my lathe is, once you slide that off, you have this nice flat here for the set screws. And you also have a a ledge, I guess is the right term, that you can then just slide that gasket up against and anchor it in place. And it works really nicely. So just here's the piece on my lathe with a short little video. And when you turn the lathe on, it gets that, and there's just very little resistance here. And I find once I put the tube on here, there's no tendency for it to go around and round. And I thought at first, I could just live with my lathe like this until I realized I could no longer get my hammer bar in there to take pieces off the headstock. So you still need to slide this thing on and off when you use it, which to me is an inconvenience to have to set that up every time I want to use the vacuum chuck. But otherwise, it works really well. I get 27, 28 inches of vacuum really easily. And One Way, of course, makes beautiful aluminum vacuum chucks that go with this, but you can buy those or not buy them. So another way, and what was talked about during the meeting, was the frugalvacuum.com. And this is a completely different way of solving the same problem, which is why I liked it a lot. He must make these by hand, and it's fun to get something in the mail that looks like someone made it by hand. But there are a couple of components to it. I'm not sure what material this is on the end of the actual vacuum chuck, but it's fairly strong, and he threads the lid or threads this piece that it just screws onto your headstock, and he sells them in various threads for different lathes. And then to make this work, all you have to do is thread a tube onto this piece, and it can be a hard fitting because, oh, and by the way, notice that he's filed these down to flat so you can get a wrench on this thing if you have to. And I asked him if you could just put a hole in this and put the other kind of wrenches. Just a straight wrench might be an easier approach than to have to go get something big like a monkey wrench to take this off your lathe if it has. But where he was really clever is he put the bearing right into the vacuum chuck. So when you screw this onto your lathe, this bearing in the bottom spins such that you've hooked it up to the hose and the hose doesn't move. And then you're good to go with a vacuum chuck, basically with one piece, and you can get rid of that whole other thing. You don't need it at all.
Did you find that bearing leaked air?
I found it held vacuum pretty well. And you get the full use of it. So it's another way to do things. It's a lot less expensive than the One Way. It's just a different approach. And I was just impressed the fact that you could think so differently about the same problem, come up with two very different solutions, and they both work.
Bruce, on my first attempt at making one, I actually used the solution that you have right here, where the bearing was embedded in the base of the vacuum chuck. And no matter what I did to that bearing, I could not get it to pull down a vacuum of more than maybe 12 inches.
Huh.
And I also, just so you know, that stem that goes through the arbor is not required. That was like a universal fit version, so that if I made an object partly at home and was going to demonstrate using the vacuum chuck, I could put it on any 1.25-inch thread, and that stem going through created a universal fitting. I have made adapters for both my jet and for the club's Powermatic that behave like your one from One Way, but they are not bearinged. They again rely on metal tube running in polyethylene tubing.
That's right. It was a metal tube with the polyethylene tube. And it just concerned me that if you got debris in there, that whole thing could crunch fairly quickly, couldn't it? No, maybe not, but
I don't think so. I think the only way you're going to damage it is if, like, the vacuum assembly, the gauge assembly fell off the lathe or something, so that it put a big bending force at the end of the metal tube inside the plastic. It's going to pretty quickly soften the plastic to where it closes off or breaks in half. But as long as your vacuum
you're getting maybe depend on the flow rate of the CFMs of your pump. I'm using a 3 cubic foot per minute, I guess, pump, actually, which Frugal sells. he sells a pretty nice pump that is oil free, which I liked the idea of. But you pay a little more money for that too. Anyway, I just wanted to share a very different approach to the same problem, and I like them all.
Any more comments on that?
I might say I've had the one way for 20 years. Works as good as the day I bought it. I looked at making one using a bearing mounted in a wooden piece that would fit onto the end that was on a bowl lathe that I had. And in the end, it was $125 Canadian in 2001, and it still is. I think it's beautifully made, as you said, Bruce. That's the way to go, in my opinion. Some form mounted on the outer, flange. Some people have got them fastened to their hand wheel. There's all kinds of designs, but the idea of having a tube running within a tube for me is not a long-term solution.
One thing you might want to take a look at, Bob Hamilton. He's an Ontario woodturner. He's no longer with us. He died a few years back, but he posted a video of one of the things that can happen with a vacuum system. And it's pretty dramatic. So look up Bob Hamilton and his vacuum system. He actually had a camera just watching whatever he was doing one day, and he actually captured his vacuum system bearing seizing up. And it's pretty dramatic. It sure made me pay attention when I hook mine up. I make damn sure that I know that my bearing is in good shape before I start every time now.
Anybody else on this? Okay, I'm going to try and get rid of all the spotlights and get back to a gallery view. Not sure I can do that. Gallery view. I think we're right on the hour. And we're leaving some work on the table. And this is an unusual coffee hour in that we didn't show any work. We just showed apparatus, except for Don's cannonball holders. So that's unusual for us, but that's how it goes today. And we're right on the hour. And so that brings to a close another Woodturners Weekly Coffee Hour. We'll see you again next week. And so
Wood shop. Thank God for wood.